Can 5G survive the pandemic? Hi, everybody. Karen Roby here for ZDNet with Scott Fulton. And Scott, it seems almost seems almost weird to talk about something like this at a time like this. So is there really a good reason for us to still care about this topic?
Hi, Karen. Yeah, it sounds at first it could sound a little self-serving to say, "Hey, we know you're cooped up at home in a pandemic, but hey, let's talk about 5G because that's what we're in the business of producing stories about." But there is a critical tie-in here. We are all being connected right now by bandwidth. Uh, as a matter of fact, it's bandwidth issues that have caused you and me in the last few weeks to tape this very segment over and over. There's a lot of things that play into that. One, Zoom is changing very rapidly. It's getting new versions. It's adding more security. They've now released version 3.0, so a lot of people are seeing a completely new program. And there are behavioral issues with people using Zoom 3 and using Zoom 2. That's one thing. The other thing is I'm going to try to hold very, very still relatively, because when I move around, like you typically see me moving around, I cause bandwidth issues with our very connection that we're having right now. People need more bandwidth, more channels, more simultaneous channels. The phone system that we currently have operates on several channels simultaneously. That's part of what 4G LTE was all about. 5G is about adding more channels to that so that you have these collective, um, these added together segments of bandwidth that collectively produce a fatter channel than you normally had, so that your wireless connections are broader and smoother than they were before. We were in progress in some cases ahead of time, back before the pandemic started, getting the towers retrofitted to be able to afford this new bandwidth that we desperately need. I think I've been speaking with some people who say that now that they're doing a lot more of their business on a channel such as this one, and now that everybody's in-home studio looks more and more like mine, that people are going to see we really need to spruce this up. So the 5G is going to be part of the solution once we get back in the mode of being able to implement what those solutions are. But back when we're in a state of mind where we say, okay, how do we clean up our mess after we get a haircut and things like that? Well, we're going to get closer to that point in time as long as the people who are treating us now continue to risk their lives for us. So a shout out to the first responders, the ambulance drivers, the doctors, the nurses. I have family who are nurses whom I pray for every day. The people who are keeping us together on the front lines. I'll say this again, I've said this to a few people. In history, there have been whole generations of people willing to throw themselves into the fire to save the planet Earth. D-Day was about all of that in June of 1944. And here we are at a D-Day moment of our lives where women and men are throwing themselves into the fire for us. We're going to get to a point where we can start doing things with 5G again, but it's going to be 100% thanks to these magnificent people who are sacrificing parts of themselves, risking their lives so that I can be doing this.
All right, so Scott, but before we wrap up here, what do you think looking ahead are some likely scenarios for the evolution of 5G?
Well, I think the research money is going to have to come from somewhere. And it's been explained to me before that in a functional economy, you would have the sales of 5G phones to consumers that would help generate revenue necessary for these somewhat academic research programs into things like millimeter wave and small cells, part of the 5G portfolio outside the radio access network. You need that research to continue, and the funding has to come from somewhere. That funding could come from government investment in infrastructure projects. But you got to have governments that are interested in that. So what is the likelihood? What's the likely setup that we can have? Well, we can perhaps establish more public-private partnerships or PPPs between government entities. But are those federal entities necessary? Right now in the United States, the bodies that have the most financial stake in wireless infrastructure are cities and municipalities. They produce the permits, they levy the taxes and fees involved with that. They reap a lot of the revenue first. In some cases, it's the states, but in a lot of cases, it's the city level. Well, it'd be nice to have like a United Cities of America, a way for Atlanta and Raleigh, North Carolina, and San Antonio, Texas, to pool their resources and maybe fund some research into some of these new components to 5G, like millimeter wave, like vehicle to everything or V2X communications. But that type of coalition is going to be hard to forge when you're in the middle of a disaster scenario where your cities are basically trying to open the roads so that the ambulances can get through, to make sure that there's power priority to the hospitals and to the tent hospitals that are being established for overflows, even as the situation for New York City starts to flatten, even as they are having success. God bless you, New York, in flattening the curve. You have cities elsewhere in the nation that are still on the left side of the curve. And as long as that curve is a curve, you're going to have less incentive to want to fund things like vehicle to everything communications. So you're going to see a back burner on that for now. 5G, in terms of expanding the bandwidth for our phones and perhaps for fixed wireless communications, those channels that are going directly into our home that are replacing cable, that might still happen, and that might still be prioritized, because we need a way forward. And we need to be able to talk more like this, you and me, because we're saving our lives right now by doing this. But the other things that are happening, the what used to be called the fringe elements of 5G, but that are still very, very important, communication between devices, Internet of Things, Internet of Devices type of communications, it's going to be hard finding a way forward for that as long as the pandemic scenario continues. So God bless our healthcare workers who are helping to find us a way out of this, and let's speed up the vaccine finding process.
Yep, most definitely. All right. Well, Scott, that's a good place to end here. We certainly appreciate your insight on this and much more on 5G. Lots of articles I know that you've put up and others there on ZDNet. We hope you'll check them out. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.